Welcome to episode 255 of the 6G podcast. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 6G and 5G. We cover about 6 topics in roughly 30 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Anshul Sog, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Mike Dano from Ookla. Mike, how's your week been so far?
Pretty quiet and hot. Hot here in Denver. Hot and quiet. It's a good kind of week, right? I'm actually getting some stuff done. Not too bad. How about you? How's your week?
I I think I'm getting a lot of stuff done too. Not too much travel, so I can be productive. I did go to the zoo this morning with my toddler because it's not too hot here, but it's going to get hotter. And if I go in the morning, I can at least avoid most of the heat and actually enjoy, you know, the animals because they don't like the heat either. So if it's really hot, like there's nothing to see. They're all just hiding.
And a zoo with a toddler might be the best place to be just in the world in general. So I'm a little bit jealous. That sounds like a good
Yeah,
time.
and there's a safari park, but it's like it's even further away and hotter, and I don't even want to go there unless it's cold.
Yeah, yeah. Get you some of the reptile habitat.
Yeah,
That's a good place to escape the heat if it's too hot. It's usually
yeah.
enclosed. Well, at least the one
So
in Denver is.
we've had a pretty busy week in terms of news. Um, I think I'll start off with a fairly light one. Actually, I don't know why I did this order, but I think it's from soft to very big news.
We'll build
Um,
up to it.
this was this was a partnership for Verizon with BMW, but um, it's actually KDDI. I think is actually delivering the solution. So KDDI is a Japanese telecom company, but they also do um, you know telecom services. And it seems like they won this contract with BMW, and they chose Verizon's standalone 5G network to essentially run the telematics for um, all of BMW's new vehicles, which is really interesting because it also includes Mini, but also uh, for a while it was actually T-Mobile. So it looks like yet again the automotive industry has found a new partner. I don't know if you've really covered the auto industry much, but like almost every cycle, all potential design wins within a vehicle are up for grabs, whether it's silicon connectivity, infotainment, like every software, like everything is up for grabs with every generation. So um, it looks like Verizon won this generation via KDDI. Um, and yeah, it seems like um, Verizon's trusted because they already work with Volkswagen Group. But the truth is, like AT&T has been around for a while too, and they've actually the first connected car I ever remember using was a Cadillac with a AT&T Wi-Fi solution. And if anything, I believe GM is like a wholly AT&T house still. So um, it's really interesting. But I think we're moving to a place where all cars are going to be always connected, and eventually V2X will take off.
Yeah, it's true. It's been connected cars have long been interesting, and I know from covering it for years and years, AT&T had such a huge connected car business. It was a real big player in this space early on, sort of in the 4G era. And so it's interesting to see. Yeah, everybody has been. It's interesting to see Verizon get some of this business, and I assume that competition for the connected car, market is going to increase. I also think, as we slowly but carefully venture into the world of autonomous driving, I know Waymo has expanded here into Denver. You know, many, if not all, of those solutions rely on a cellular network to some degree. So I would expect that, connectivity is just going to become more and more important in the automotive industry. And certainly those, super low latency, super high bandwidth, those are the kinds of things, super reliable. Those are the kinds of things that I think automakers are going to be increasingly looking at rather than just, can this connection unlock somebody's door if they get locked out. I think the requirements for connected cars are only going to increase from here on out.
Agreed.
So I'll start the opposite direction for my top stories, and I'll go from what I think is probably the biggest news item I saw this week, which is a leadership shakeup at T-Mobile. Not terribly another one. Yeah, but I would say this one especially is not necessarily a surprise. Srini Goplan is the new CEO over there. Is in the process of taking over leadership from Mike Sievert, and he's beginning to put his leadership team in place. And so the new announcement that we saw this week was that he's bumping up John Saw, who has more responsibility now than ever before. And John Saw, is I think a friend of both of us. He's been around in the industry for years and years. He was a real proponent of 5G in his days at Sprint, and then when T-Mobile acquired Sprint, he's been able to rise up that ladder, following in the footsteps of people like Neville Ray, and now he really oversees the whole network engineering, IT, cybersecurity business at T-Mobile. It's a broad portfolio. But I think the interesting thing about this leadership announcement at T-Mobile for this week, the new thing that they did was bring in Chris Sambar. And if that name rings a bell, there's a reason. Chris Sambar was a top executive at AT&T for a long time and was the architect of FirstNet at AT&T. So when AT&T bid and won the contract for FirstNet, Chris Sambar was a leading executive in that charge and really helped get FirstNet up and running off the ground. And I've met him a few times. He's a real interesting guy, very straightforward. Really well spoken, very direct, and it really shows he is Navy, and his military bearing shows in his interactions. He's very straightforward. It seems like he's a real person to get things done, and so he is now the Chief Enterprise Officer at T-Mobile. And so, I assume he'll be leading the charge there at T-Mobile as T-Mobile pursues more, government, public safety type business, just like, AT&T and FirstNet. And then the last thing about this is that we did see some folks leaving T-Mobile, which is sort of very expected in leadership shakeups like this. But Mike Katz looks like he's on the way out. And he was one of the top lieutenants under Mike Sievert, bounced around in a few different positions, but it looks like he's on his way out now that Srini is sort of overhauling leadership team at T-Mobile right now. But interesting to bring in an AT&T person. That's the interesting thing.
And Andre became CMO.
That's right. And I don't know him very well. I don't even know. Yeah.
He's from Deutsche Telekom. He was the old enterprise and broadband guy before they brought Chris on. If you hadn't taken this topic, I was going to. So, not a surprise there. But yeah, I mean, Chris Sambar. First of all, I still don't understand why AT&T let that guy go. It was very unclear what happened there.
Yeah,
it sounded like it was good. That's a whole other discussion. Now, them letting him go to a competitor like this, not good. I think he's probably one of the few people in the industry that legitimately carries a significant amount of clout with him just because of what he achieved and what he did for AT&T. Also, I wasn't surprised when I heard about this news. I went on Twitter and the AST, Space Mobile, Space Mob guys were losing their minds.
I did see that too. And they tend to do that on Twitter, don't they?
Yeah, and then they started, with all kinds of theories that, T-Mobile was going to dump SpaceX and sign a deal with AST Space Mobile and blah, 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 blah. And here's the thing. I actually think T-Mobile will consider that as an opportunity with him in there because I think he had a board seat on the AST Space Mobile board when he worked at AT&T. So, that's a pretty significant person in terms of influence and control. Obviously, he lost that board seat when he left, but He knows the inner workings of that company better than anybody would. And yeah, I just think like there might be something there, but I wouldn't say like dumping Starlink and signing an AST Space Mobile partnership would be it. I would hope that maybe they, um, you know, sign an additional deal. I don't think Starlink is an exclusive deal anymore. Surely it doesn't seem like it from the SpaceX side. And yeah, I just think that we're in a place where uh, alliances are shifting, and as far as people who know what they're doing and can drive an enterprise business, I think Chris is the right person for that. And obviously he'll work with Mo on the TFB side for marketing, but Mo also came from AT&T, so they might even work together pretty well considering they already know each other. Um, so yeah, I think this is a pretty big move. To your point, probably the biggest news of the week. Um, and also, it's like really surprising that like the T-Mobile management structure keeps changing, because like usually that happens when companies are not doing well, but like they're literally outperforming their competitors, and it's like it just doesn't make sense to me. But it does seem like they are pulling in talent from wherever they can get it, um, and this is just seems like a win for T-Mobile.
It does. I agree. I think Chris Sambar is definitely a win. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to watch. Aside from AT&T, both T-Mobile and Verizon now have new top leadership in Dan Schulman and Srini. And so, I would expect as those executives, get a hold of operations, find out what their strategy is. I wouldn't be surprised to see additional leadership changes. As a result of having new
And
CEOs.
we had Chris on the podcast. Actually, he did a podcast with Abel actually and Will. So we had both AST and AT&T at the time on the podcast.
There you go, friends of the pod.
Yeah, literally friend of the pod, but also like legitimately, I think one of our most viewed podcasts of all time. So not a huge surprise. Maybe we'll have him on again.
Let's see. Yeah, we'll have to try. We'll see what he says.
Yeah. But yeah, I think with all that excitement, I'm going to have a downer topic as my second topic. And I don't know if you saw this one, but I actually didn't see it until I heard that the Minister of Communications of Australia was chastising Telstra for having a nationwide outage. And supposedly this was a network timekeeping issue that was a software configuration that basically caused their entire GPS node to reset, disrupting timing settings across the network, because timing is how you manage a lot of the communications issues. And they said that the faults in their network caused over 300 emergency response calls to not go through. So in Australia, it's called a 000. Here it's a 911, but in Australia it's 000, and they said 300 calls did not go through, and it's the latest in a series of issues that have disrupted emergency call systems, and one last year led to 4 deaths. So this is becoming a pretty significant political problem within Australia. They have a very concentrated market where Telstra is one of the biggest, and they really don't have much competition for service, and prices are pretty high. The same goes for wired broadband as well. And I was actually looking into this because I was curious about like what other things happened, and it's pretty similar to whenever there's an outage in the U.S. You get like side outages as a result of that, where people think their network is down, but it's actually they can't get to the other network. But people were complaining they couldn't use Uber, even if they weren't on that network, because Uber was those Uber users were using the Telstra network. They said over 6,000 welfare checks were made on the days of the outage, because they were like unsure if they could reach that family member. So it was a very interesting situation. Apparently, EVs were unable to charge because a lot of those rely on cellular infrastructure. Trains were suspended as a result of it. Obviously, payments were halted. There's a whole story on news.com.au about like all of the impacts that affected Australians. And some people thought it might have even been a cyber attack, because when you take out that big of a piece of infrastructure, people are going to assume something nefarious is happening. But yeah, it's really interesting that when a country that's this dependent on a single carrier, when there's an outage, it becomes a national problem. And we've had these happen in the U.S. as well, but it sounded like this one was especially bad.
I mean, right? Yeah, everything's great until the service goes down, and then you really find out how valuable and important wireless service is to your daily life. It's just you take it for granted until it's not available anymore. I did briefly. I didn't have a chance to really look at it in detail, but I did briefly go over to Down Detector, another Ookla service, and there's an extensive series of comments from people who have been affected by this outage. No surprise there.
Yeah, I saw a big red spike. What's funny is those spikes also happen when off-network users can't reach their friends that are on the network that's down, and they report an outage as well. So you actually end up getting more outages reported than there actually are.
Yeah.
And just to give you the audience an idea, you basically have three carriers, which are Telstra, Optus, and TPG Telecom, and it's 41% Telstra, 29% Optus, and 17% TPG. So Telstra is literally the largest by a significant margin in Australia. So it would be like T-Mobile, more than T-Mobile going out, because T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon are pretty equally matched in terms of size. They're fairly similar. So Australia is actually a much more concentrated market than the U.S.
Yeah, and right, it just goes to show how important that wireless service is. And I know some of my colleagues here at Ookla, including Luke Kehoe, have done some real deep research into some of the outages that have they sort of pop up across the world. I think that I know he's got a piece that he's working on right now about the earthquakes in Venezuela and the effect that has had on the communications network there. I think one takeaway that we're seeing from a number of reports that my colleagues like Luke and Carrie Baker have done is that the importance of satellite is growing as these sort of outages and disasters hit and affect telecom networks. Certainly the terrestrial networks are can be affected by a lot of different things, wildfires and flooding and earthquakes and stuff, and so it really. And so when you look at the data in a lot of these outages, the usage of satellite will spike, right as that is happening, and so it really does reflect the fact that it actually is great to have, even if you don't necessarily use it all the time, it is really great to have an extra layer of coverage that is completely independent from a terrestrial network. Just in the case of these outages, and as connectivity becomes more and more important for, public safety, search and rescue, if you can get that stuff up and running more quickly, or even, not lose it in the first place, it really does. It really does reflect this extra layer of connectivity that satellite delivers. It's very interesting to watch that kind of data. But yeah, another huge outage. Such a black eye for Telstra. I think it's it's the worst situation for an operator. Something that takes forever to recover from a public relations standpoint.
Totally.
Yeah. So I'll move to my next one. Oh, so I have I've got a pair of interesting ones that I wanted to mention this week. just interesting research that came across. I don't think there's not a huge amount of news going on this week, but there is some interesting research that came out. And the first one I'll point to is Analysis Mason. So they had put out, it's a pretty short report on LinkedIn. I believe they have a link to the more full report that's in their paywall. But they basically just said that according to Analysis Mason, for the first time since 2018, they have recorded a growth in the rate of mobile data traffic. Growth in the rate of growth of mobile data traffic. So this is the first time since 2018. They said that global mobile traffic growth stood at 22% at the end of 2025, up from a trough of 16% earlier in the year. So basically, the rate of growth is increasing on mobile networks. And so they said, obviously the idea is, well, is that AI? Is AI traffic leading to a rise in the growth of mobile data? And they said, no, not necessarily. They said, really, it's probably two different factors. They said fixed wireless would be one. And I think that comes as no surprise. I mean, the average fixed wireless user here in the U.S. consumes about 400 gigabytes a month, or even more in some cases, which is 10 to 30 times the amount of data that's consumed by an average smartphone user. So it does make sense that fixed wireless would contribute to a growth in the amount of overall mobile traffic there is. But the other thing that they said, which I thought was interesting, was adaptive bitrate streaming. So they said essentially as networks improve, they're able to handle better quality video. And so they do. And as a result, there's more video traffic on the network, which is sort of a, obviously type conclusion, but it's not one that I had necessarily thought of. So yeah, just a hat tip to Analysis Mason for some interesting data, partly because last year and the year before, there's been a lot of discussion about a slowdown in the rate of growth in traffic on mobile networks. And so the fact that they're seeing a rise in the growth rate, I think, is certainly interesting.
Yeah, did they get into what they thought the cause was?
Yeah, that fixed wireless and the
Okay.
adaptive bit rate. That was kind of
Okay.
the two things that they really said, the two driving
Yeah, I think fixed wireless makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
just because it's taking some broadband network traffic away and shifting it towards mobile network traffic, right? So that's that makes sense. It's still net the same amount of network traffic. It's just not going through it's not going through copper or fiber the whole way anymore. But yeah, I also think we will reach a point where AI will also, I think, drive more network traffic, because the user might maybe leave their phone on their desk, but their phone will still be actively using the internet while they're away or not using the phone. So I think that might be something to watch for in the next few years, especially with a lot of these agentic phones that are starting to happen. But it is really interesting to see an actual increase in the rate of change.
Yeah, I thought so too. Just an interesting research point to talk about this week.
Yes, and that gets me to my third and final topic, which is that SpaceX has applied to the FCC to request for 100,000 satellites with its Gen 3 satellite architecture. What's interesting is that, first of all, 100,000 is a lot. And they're supposedly going to say that they could serve multi-gigabit with these Gen 3 satellites across the globe, which they claim is symmetrical, which I don't fully believe, considering, uplink and downlink are rarely symmetrical over anything other than fiber. Yeah, what I do think is that it will bring significant improvements to speeds and capacity, but it wouldn't be to a point where I think we would see gigabit unless they have enough spectrum for it. Um, but what's interesting is that this Gen 3 system will utilize the same KU, KA, V, and E bands that they've already been granted by the FCC for the Gen 2 systems. But they're adding W and D band as well, which are between 92 and 275 gigahertz, so more capacity. Um, and then on top of that, they are, um, you know, they're going to put a lot more satellite junk in space, and they do have to, depopulate these when they, lose whatever issue might occur. They have to decommission them, and crash them and then replace them. I also don't know how they're going to get 100,000 up there. That's quite the undertaking in terms of SpaceX actually launching satellites. They would have to have starships going every day for like a few years to hit that. So that will be very interesting to see how that works, logistically. Um, and yeah, it's SpaceX currently has 10,000 satellites in orbit today, and has a total authorized constellation of 15,000. So that's like a considerable amount, and that doesn't even account for the whole data centers conversation that they've been pushing too. So I think there's a lot to absorb with this request. Um, I also think it's maybe a bit on the optimistic side in terms of how many satellites will actually be launched. And then on top of that, tangentially related, SpaceX also merged their brand with XAI, so now it's called like SpaceX AI, and they also launched a new Grok model yesterday. Um, I'm just talking about that because everything at SpaceX is kind of interconnected and tangentially related to each other now. And that was with Cursor, who they are now supposedly buying for $60 billion. So this is very much a coding focused model. But I'm sure that Grok is going to find its way into satellites, whether we like it or not.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I will also add just a little tiny, also SpaceX/Starlink related news. The Fi Collar company, who makes dog collars with cellular and GPS tracking. I have one for my dog because he's a little bit crazy and friendly. They launched a Starlink based dog collar, that they say gets 5 days of battery life. And you can basically track your dog anywhere in the world, because as long as it has satellite connection, your dog is going to be found. And I will say, as someone who uses the dog collar quite a bit, it's assuming the battery life doesn't die, because when that dog is not near the base station, which is a Bluetooth based solution, the battery life goes down pretty quickly. So it'll be interesting to see how much actual battery life the Starlink based version gets, because I think it's like a bonding of Starlink with T-Mobile 5G.
I have been having troubles with my dog shipping himself to Abu Dhabi, so I'm glad to hear that the tracking collar will work all over the world. In that case, that's a relief. But yeah, no, the Starlink satellites always interesting. Just everything is interesting about Starlink at this point. I don't have much to add. I mean, I think when they make those requests, they are requesting as much as possible. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to launch that many satellites. It means that this is the request that is big enough that we think we can get away with it and get that many. And then we'll make a certain number. It'll probably be less than that, but I'm not sure that that's a target number. I think that's the maximum amount that they think that they can request. And the other thing too is I think those V3 satellites are so big that I think it's only Starship can launch them. So right now, SpaceX does not yet have a way to launch those new satellites into space, because they're so big and heavy. So we'll see. And actually, I did one last thing. I did I looked this up later because I was just curious about it last week, but I did find out, and I looked it up again. So those V3 satellites are going to be in a lower orbit, and they're going to be bigger. And part of the way that they will stay in orbit is by using ion thrusters powered by argon gas. So I mean, here we go. That's just cool. I don't know. I got nothing to say about that other than wow, neat. I don't know what that is, but it sounds awesome. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I have heard of those. I was not aware that the V3 satellites would have them because I remember Elon even commenting on those, some of the developments in that space around the thrusters, because you can get a pretty sustained burn from those with very little fuel.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to keep them up there. So yeah, all kinds of crazy technology that we get to talk about lately with the collision of the space industry and the telecom industry. So, and speaking of interesting collisions, my last item that I wanted to talk about um, was the collision of the telecom industry and the AI industry. And this is a hat tip to my colleague Afandi, who this week put out a major report on some network statistics for AI. So it's a very long report, tons of details. I can't possibly go into all of it. It's just way too long to summarize. But there is lots of interesting things in it. So if anyone's out there is interested in the research that Afandi has done into what network capabilities will be necessary for AI, and then what the networks look like globally now in terms of supporting AI. It's pretty interesting. The one takeaway I'll mention, which I thought, again, there's tons in there, so there's lots of stuff to digest. But the one little tidbit that I'd pull out is that there was one of the many calculations that Fandy did was looking at the amount of network resources that have been dedicated to the uplink. So the theory here is that in an age of ubiquitous AI and glasses that will connect to AI services and then tell you about what you're seeing, the uplink will become more important. And that's important for telecom operators because today networks are primarily geared toward providing speedy download services. And so the uplink is almost an afterthought. And if you do the calculations, you can kind of tell how much network resources are allocated to the uplink today by looking at the overall network performance for both download and upload. And what Afandi found is that in the U.S., operators here have very fast networks on the download, but on the upload is a different matter. They actually do not allocate very much network resources to the uplink, essentially only 5%, which of the countries and operators that Afandi looked at, that was on the very extreme low end. So operators in Europe, operators in Asia allocate a greater percentage of network resources to the uplink than they do here in the US. And so it doesn't necessarily mean a great deal today. We're still here in the early days of AI when there's very little that's being uploaded, unless you're a YouTube streamer or a live podcaster like some folks here. But potentially in the future, that uplink capacity will become a lot more important, in which case the wireless network operators in this country will have to adjust their networks in order to allocate a greater portion of their network resources to the uplink rather than the downlink. So still early days on the AI front, but again, interesting stuff to look at for now.
Yeah, I mean, that aligns perfectly with what I've seen from my research on the AI side with related to 5G. There's just more demand for uplink. And I think if you look at the 6G standard, there's a lot more about improving uplink than there was in 5G. I mean, even some of the 5G releases are about adding more uplink capabilities. So in general, I think we're in a place where things are going to shift in that direction. And I think there's going to just be need for more spectrum to, allow for that. And yeah, I also think maybe more spectrum will deliver potentially better coverage as well. So, I'm optimistic. But I also think that it's very true that we're going to have this shift happen, and it'll also have to change, user devices too, because it takes more power to push more uplink, and downlink is not everything. Obviously, if you're all about consumption, it is, but I think we're in a place where AI is going to push that more, and yeah, to your point, the carriers are going to have to make changes to address that. And I think we'll just see that shift happen as 6G rolls out.
Yeah. The days of downlink only focused operators are over. I think it's time to start thinking about the uplink, and so it'll be interesting to see how that changes over the next couple months and years.
And also how they market that.
Right. We do know some operators in Asia are selling uplink specific service plans for heavy online influencers and that kind of thing. So
totally.
We haven't seen that yet here in the U.S., but I think it's only a matter of time before more marketing is focused on uplink than downlink.
Well, I mean, you have like T-Mobile Super Mobile, right? That's kind of, I have a feeling that's much better uplink experience than any other mobile user experience. But I was going to say, the U.S. in general, the way a lot of operators have behaved in the past is that they charged extra for better uplink, and it was mostly for the business users only. It was, as a consumer, you didn't even have an option to pay more to get better uplink, whether that was for cellular or for broadband cable. Obviously on fiber, you just get symmetrical, and it's, it rips like no other. And, you at the higher tiers, you struggle to justify its existence. But on the cellular side, in general, uplinks are pretty poor. So I think anybody pushing that envelope will, I think, end up a better user experience, right? Because so much of what users do today is cloud-based. And just having a better uplink will, I believe, it not only improve how they're experiencing their apps, but also how good their battery life is, right? Because the faster you stop sending packets on the uplink, the less power you're going to use, right? Uplink is more expensive power-wise than downlink is. So, yeah, I think there might be something there, but I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves the devices and chipsets and modems and all that too.
It will take some time. It'll take some time to adjust. It's a whole industry built around download, so it's going to take some time to pivot.
Totally. Well, I think that wraps our topics for this week. I really appreciate you joining me again today, Mike, and our listeners who followed us on the live stream and who will listen to us later on their favorite podcasting platform or on YouTube or on LinkedIn or on Twitch. We are streaming on all those platforms. And please don't forget to rate us and subscribe. And we hope that you guys found this week's topics interesting. And if anybody ever would like to give insights on a future topic, please feel free to reach out to either of us on social media. We're both on Twitter. I'm at OnShellSog and Mike is at Mike D. Dano. And we hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and please tune again next week.